There are two things I wanted to tell before I get into those slides. First one is successful entrepreneurs. It's about that. The second one is successful business models. It's really easy to give advice. I can give you advice like your mother-in-law. No, it's hard to follow them. So, and the second part is business model. There is no one successful business model. There is no one size fits all. This model works for me. It doesn't mean it will work for you. You have to be clever and creative for your model. Of course, you can learn a lot from the history, but be creative. When we started, everyone told we were wrong, and even the company that acquired us, called Red Hat, they told Red Hat is one of a kind, and you cannot replicate that. And we were able to do it. So all my advice is don't take it too seriously. Just be creative. You follow your model. And I have often found new entrepreneurs who want to be entrepreneurs. They are very even protective about their ideas. They won't even share the ideas to them. They will keep it secret, or they will tell you don't share it with anyone. The truth is, ideas, I joke around, ideas cost just $15. Cost of 3 espresso shots, 3 visits to Starbucks. The first time you go there and you brainstorm, you got an idea. Second time you go, you validated it. If it's the third espresso shot, then you are on to something that you are believing in it, right? You take it forward. But ideas really cost nothing. Today you think about Facebook, there was MySpace before. Think about Google, there was Yahoo and bunch of them before. No ideas are really new. Some of them are, but most of the time, it's really not about the ideas. If you are getting into some space, it's actually good to have competition. There are a lot of companies already doing much better than you. Don't worry about that. It's actually a good thing. It is always about execution. It's not about the ideas. So this is how we started the company. The idea was pretty much born in Starbucks. In fact, the truth is we had no idea what we were about to do. There was only one belief. The way we built the company, it was almost like starting a religion, new religion. How do you do that, right? You have to be an evangelist. You go hire, you evangelize to a bunch of people, and then they in turn become evangelists. And we built almost like a cult. Why? Because there was a strong reason, and there was a real valid reason behind what we did. It wasn't because we wanted to become rich and famous. It wasn't because we wanted to be an entrepreneur. Actually, that's the last thing I wanted to be. Actually, in 2000, I finished my engineering in 1999, 95-99 batch, and by then I was already hacking free software meaning the freedom behind it. If you have heard about open source or free software, the GNU Linux operating system, I was already working on it. I strongly believe that ideas should be free. If you have an apple, I have an apple, we both exchange, we still have one apple each. But if we both have one idea each, if we exchange, we have two ideas each, right? Those copyright laws, the patents, all those things were created during the Industrial Revolution on a material model. Making 100 cars costed 100 times, but in software you make billion copies, it doesn't cost so much. And the model was very restrictive. Today it's almost impossible to write any useful software without violating some patent or another. So we believed in something, we believed in that model, we believe that software should be free. Free is not about free of cost, it's about the freedom, and freedom is expensive. And that's one reason I was very clear, I didn't want to work for a proprietary software company. And I actually, in 1999, in 2001, I came to Bangalore to do social service with another guy who came from US to India to do social service. I said, I should be helping you. And then we both took a part-time job, and that's where I ended up with a startup. And it was kind of accidental. But we were very clear, I was very clear, I'm not going to do proprietary software. And if I'm not going to make any compromise, I find every other way to make it happen, right? So I actually built that startup from scratch. I hired all the guys who were actually hacking free software projects along with me, and they all had the same reason, same belief. These guys were writing code in their free time and submitting patches to the projects I was running, and when they were getting a job to do the same thing full time, they were fascinated by it. And it's not just about the software freedom. The kind of work we were doing was also path-breaking. We were doing supercomputing research, and actually 2001, I couldn't afford to buy a laptop for myself, and it did not stop us from dreaming because we had access to the software, we had access to the entire operating system. Our imagination was the limit, and we had similar guys who felt very strongly about it, had the same passion. We all belong to the same religion. And no matter what hurdles we faced, we were willing to fight it, and we were willing to learn. If we had to become a sales engineer, we had to become a sales guy, website designer, whatever it took. We just believed fundamentally we were smart, and we were willing to do anything to make it successful. It sounded crazy for many people that we are writing software and then we are giving it away for free, including the source code. How are you going to make money from it? Nobody believed that a business model was possible, but we didn't have a choice. Other choice was to fail, and then we started figuring out ways to do that. That was in the previous company. All the technology we wrote for building supercomputer, basically through a bunch of cheap commodity boxes that was available, solved the problem of the software layer. You took hundreds, thousands of nodes, and if we had a powerful, scalable operating system layer, you can build supercomputers. And that idea actually worked, and the software technology, all the code we wrote, we released as free software or open source, and we were getting customers from the community. This was in our previous company. And that's how we ended up building the world's second fastest supercomputer. It was the fastest supercomputer for the United States. And it did not matter, right? Just 3-4 years before, I couldn't buy a computer for myself. And here we had that power, right? It was just like a very small team. It did not matter whether we had a big office or not. We were able to grow. In 2004, pretty much the same team came out. CEO decided to do something else, and this small team, we were again back to square one. We had to do something again. We were not willing to work for a proprietary software company, and that's one reason, right? So what else we can do? We will build a company around ourselves, and that's how this company was born. Early on, it was actually called Z Research. Z stood for Zillion, and the product. We thought we will do a scalable operating system, and then we thought we will name it as Gluster. And in just 3-4 months of the company, we actually had a customer. This was from it's actually a state-owned oil corporation of Venezuela. They came to us. They flew to India to meet me at a conference to give me a business. And that was $500,000 just for the software portion of it and prototype, and that was great. That was way higher than the angel investment we raised. Why? Because they actually learned about us through all the work that we released into the community when we built the supercomputer before, and here they wanted us to help them migrate away from IBM Regatta and mainframes into commodity Intel Linux clusters. We thought that was great. That's easy. We took the job, and in 2-3 months we were able to do that prototype. But the bigger problem was they actually had a storage problem. They had like around 1.2 petabytes of seismic data sitting on tapes, and they wanted to move to disks and do large-scale simulation so they can increase their petroleum production. And that's where actual product of Gluster was born. And we looked around, there was no other technology that could scale and meet this demand and also be reliable at the same time. When you throw lots of machines, you're getting great economics because these are cheap commodity boxes, but anything that fails, you are losing your data. We looked around and there was no solution. We realized we will write one from scratch, and that sounded very crazy. We'll go into that detail, but this is how, like pretty much like a small team. These guys were working with me on other projects. You can see like the data center was relatively quieter than the other rooms. So like this guy he never left home. Just very small team. It did not even matter when we hired whether whether you came from IIT or whether you are a PhD or a diploma, it doesn't matter. Whether you believed in that same vision, you had the same passion, did you belong to that same religion? Like that's the kind of question, right? If we had that same, if we all believed in the same thing, then we can make it happen, right? Because we always felt like if you go to a battle, if you hire a bunch of mercenaries, you are going to lose. If you find a bigger competition, you went with 10 guys and they came with 100 guys, they are all going to run away, right? But when you hire everyone in your team very passionate and they believe in the same cause, they are not good. Last man standing will still fight. And everyone shared the same thing. They said, small office, like we almost have the rack mount our engineers. Like we hardly had space in our office, but it did not matter. They came up with clever ways to adjust inside the office, and it was very important. Right? That's what it was really the team that made us successful. It's nothing else. And the most important job founder has to do is to hire. And the way you hire is not by like finding, oh, this guy is a smart guy, Google hired him, I'm going to pay him a few more lakhs extra and pull him back. They will use in the same way. Right? If you got a guy who believed in the same story and had the same passion, you're not going to lose him. And all these guys were exceptionally smart guys, and till today we hardly lost. We actually had to let 2 guys go because of attitude issues, and one guy, he was a junior most, and he actually went to create another startup, and we encouraged him. And all of them, they loved their daytime job, and it was just fun working with this team. So what did we actually do to solve that problem? We said it's really simple problem. If you want say 1 petabyte storage, instead of buying lots of expensive NetApp EMC boxes, even they don't scale. They were designed for a different kind of purpose, like storing databases. Industry was facing with a big problem that lots of files and folders are getting generated. Around exabytes of data are getting generated today. Customers are looking for something new, and we knew we can do one thing better than EMC or NetApp. We cannot do everything better than them, right? That's where the startups have one unique thing, one unique advantage that big companies don't have. You can move fast and you can do one thing better than the big companies. And if you identify that one thing and you deliver value to the customer, there is always a way to actually make them pay. I'll separately talk about how we made customers pay when we actually gave away all the technology we developed as GPL license, like free software. It was still easy for us to actually do business. But the idea was, it was just take a single say Supermicro box or a Dell box. It's a 10 terabyte box. You want 100 terabytes? Put 10 of them. Hardware-wise, it's pretty powerful. There are 10 RAID controllers, 10 processors. It's just simple logic. We needed a software layer, and developing that software layer, which is a storage operating system, a distributed file system, is an extremely challenging problem. Many companies tried doing this. Like most of the VCs will tell you, at least not today. Today, this is a hot space. When we started like 5 years before, they'll tell you this is a graveyard for startups, and it's extremely hard problem. Big companies, small companies tried this and they failed. Why do you even try? Why are you even trying? And we spoke to other industry experts, and like it's not like we wanted to talk to them. When we talk to VCs, they'll bring so-called experts from the existing field, and they will tell, these guys are crazy, these guys are naive, and it did not matter. Probably the advantage we had was we didn't come from storage space, and we didn't have any baggage. We were bold, we were brave, probably because we were naive too. It's okay, and we were able to come up with a new idea that did not have any baggage. And it is a very difficult problem, but we were able to develop a just enough storage operating system from 0 lines of code into a production environment in just a matter of 6 months. It was all about a lot of clever ideas, and we made it such an environment. And we released that code into the community. Today you see that same model, people call it cloud. And a lot of our customers, even early on when they started, like healthcare, for example, they deployed a healthcare storage, and today they are calling it healthcare cloud, because that's what they did was exactly the definition of cloud. When cloud took off, after this we were solving a problem that was across the industry, and the market was also turning towards our direction, this problem became a more pervasive problem, like the unstructured market. The problem we were solving was actually the fastest growing segment of the storage business, like 60% compound annual growth. In some ways we were lucky too, but the reason why we succeeded was we were listening to our customers. We were actually solving, the customer already paid us. We had access to customer hardware, and we wrote the software on customer's time, on customer's hardware, and ever since, every single customer we added, they were telling us we wanted these features, and we were adding those features on their time, and we grew until it reached the point where we had to scale like a cookie cutter model. We actually started saying no to customers when the features they requested were not applicable broadly. And that model, like, it allowed us to do a very low cost model, like because customers are paying us and they are giving us great feedback. We also leverage the community in a very big way. There are many things we can talk about our product, like unique things that we did. Like we have 0 software patents. Like you will find like many of companies start like brag about how many software patents they have. Like but for a startup, for us, we knew that is a war you can never win. Like even Microsoft, they loses a lot of money, and we were clear that the little money we are making, our best investment came from the customers, and that's very valuable money, right? We didn't want to give that away to lawyers, and we said if we enter that route, we are anyway going to lose, but we are going to fight through speed and innovation. We just did not bother because that's a losing battle anyways. Like in terms of the ideas, right? Like we developed a stackable user space architecture, a distributed storage operating system. We came up with elastic hashing algorithm, like a no metadata architecture. Like you can keep on like going in every feature we released. Like NetApp's killer feature was like a snap mirror. So we said that's limiting. We will do a geographic replication without snapshotting and scale to petabytes. There are so many features we can keep on talking, but when we actually spoke to customers, when we spoke to our community, the reason why we succeeded was not because of all those features. It was because common sense. Like we did things that mattered to the users. What happened was like the storage industry, right? When we entered, we saw the storage industry was very much in the mainframes era. Like when we were in the supercomputing stage too, it was very much like supercomputer guys used to laugh at the kind of design we used to do. They said like supercomputer means vector processing, high-end machines like in NUMA class processing, and they laughed at just distributed computing as they did not even classify it as supercomputer. But it doesn't matter, right? Like if your customers love what you are doing, then that's a huge validation. If your competition is telling what you are doing is wrong, that's great. Actually, that's even bigger validation, and that's going to help you succeed, right? Same thing happened in the storage space too. When we entered the storage space, we were saying that the storage was very much like monolithic, big mainframe slash machines, and these guys were refusing to tell the truth. And the customers, like if you see even Google or Facebook, for example, they would have failed if they had to buy so many NetApps and EMC boxes. Their business model itself cannot survive. Imagine if Facebook told you it's a paid service. You're not going to use Facebook. Facebook would have not happened in the first place. But there was no solution at all. So they did something just enough, like treated storage like a software problem, like an application, and then they wrote something just enough for their kind of use case, and they were able to solve the problem. It's common sense, right? So when we entered that space, we saw storage industry was refusing to admit the truth, and the end users, they knew what was right for them, and like some of them even called it like Price syndrome or Best Buy syndrome. These are like the electronic shops you get these hard drives, and these are the same hard drives NetApp and EMC was selling to you. These guys are saying, why cannot I buy these boxes and load software and solve this problem? Users are very clear what they wanted, and industry was refusing to give to them because it was too disruptive for them, and that was a great opportunity for us. And when we did something where we said software is a storage problem, why do you need Brocade certification? Why do you need EMC certification? If you want to set up say 100 terabytes, if you know how to set up a Linksys router or your like how to set up a server or a Windows XP machine, that's the kind of skill set you need. And we basically simplified the whole problem, like how you set up a bunch of FTP servers or Apache servers. It was even simpler than that. And it was spreading virally. What happened was, in 2006, we released it, right? Version 1. And in 2-3 months, we were seeing like Goldman Sachs sitting on our developer mailing list. We knew they are not going to buy from us. We were like, it was like D1. We even will call like to certain releases when we call, we will actually tag it as, we will call a code name DOA. Still people will try that. We actually came up with a lot of clever ways to solve this problem. Like if you don't like the software, even if you completely take it away, you are not risking anything. Your data was still on the disk. I'm not going to go into those details, but it took a lot of unconventional common sense approach to solve that problem, and that completely resonated with the users. And software being under GPL, they had that confidence and trust that we are going to make it and we are going to become a standard. Like imagine, a lot of people use Microsoft Office not because they love it, because their friends send them Word documents they could not open. And here, like they became a standard, right? Here is a product that customers actually are passionate about and they love it. And they are now beginning to create the same product as a standard in the industry, and that was extremely important for us. How a small company can even face like EMC or NetApp, like giants, like 5 years before, we actually went and told any of these enterprise companies that we are a storage company. Like I showed you, right? The head office was actually a co-founder's bedroom. Like the website was what I actually typed on a dark console using Emacs text editor. It did not matter. Customers were wanting for a solution. They were looking for a solution that nobody else solved, and this was giving them very high value, and that open source gave them that confidence. And they were like, these are not the CIOs. These are like the sysadmins and developers. IT guys are from startups. They have very limited budget and time crunch, and they did not ask CIO permission or CEO permission. They actually downloaded it. They tried it. They even sent patches back to us. They gave us feedback on different kinds of applications, different kinds of operating system environment and hardware environment. We were like growing, like we have 1,000+ members in our community, like developer community. That's much bigger than EMC's QA team. Like now we can see, right? Maybe we are a bunch of 10, 20 guys, but combined with our community, because we all now belong to the same religion, our community guys are going to trade shows and talking about our product, writing blogs about it, and like they were marketing for us. It was free marketing, and more than anything, right? Even if you spend on advertising, customers are not going to believe so much in advertisements. But if a friend sysadmin told this sysadmin that, hey, I tried Gluster, it's really cool, he tweeted about it, just sharing with friends, they believe that. But even better, this guy wrote on Facebook or Twitter, or he wrote a blog. Even if nobody knew who this guy was, they actually believed that more than the advertisement. We were growing virally, and we had so many guys across the world. Like, just can see, right? Most of these guys are actually our community guys. They were using us, like Pandora, for example, like Box.net, A&E, even probably WWE. You recognize. There are a lot of guys in this. Deutsche Bank called us from Germany, and like we never met them. Most of these guys, we have never met them. They were calling us because they were going to put it in a production environment. And what we were selling was not the software, it was actually a packaged relationship. That's what customers value, right? Imagine if the software was value, if you gave them an expired product, none of these guys will put it in production. It's not the software they are buying from you, it's the trust that they're going. It's like a marriage, right? Except in this case, they are paying you, right? So all these guys, like Brightcove to NTT, like they were actually running petabytes of data on their machines. The kind of development environment we had early on was all laptops and tiny machines. We didn't have that kind of budget, and customers will call us and they'll give access to their environment. They actually pay us, and that's how we were testing. Okay, we now know. By design, it was only in theory that we could hold petabytes, right? But now we know, okay, this is really holding petabytes, and then they'll even give us screenshots that we can share with others. And in trade shows, like people will come and take photos of that screen. Oh, you can see petabyte drive. That's really cool. All those customers gave us access to that environment. You can imagine the kind of budget we took. It's extremely low cost, and storage industry traditionally took millions and millions of dollars and many years, right? We completely broke all those assumptions, and here a small team sitting from India, and we were able to deliver that class of product. And the typical time, like so Pandora, for example, all of their music, Pandora is today a publicly traded company. They are popular internet radio in the United States. They are not yet available in India because they don't have rights yet. Probably at someday it will happen. All of their music service was hosted on Gluster, and I was using Pandora every day. I didn't know they were using us. Like I was watching like Netflix and all these like TV shows, right? All these content delivery networks like CDNs like Brightco and Limelight, big guys, pretty much standardized on Gluster, and these popular TV shows were streamed through our product, and I didn't know they were using us. I was using them. It was fun when we actually see these guys are visiting our website and they actually call us. And even when sales team reached out to them, they actually felt great that here is a commercial company backing this product, and they actually wanted to talk to us. And typically the production environment, now CIO gets to know, and CIO tells, like, you must be crazy to put this in a production environment, go get commercial support. But we did not sell commercial support, because commercial support is like per incident model, right? That's a service business, and that is not scalable. We are spending valuable investment into the product to build a company. Customers know that, right? So what we told was, it's a subscription, it's a pay-as-you-go model. In fact, it's actually, in some ways, it's more expensive, but customers like that model because it was on demand. You started with only 2 servers, you only paid for 2 servers. Even though it was profitable for us because we were only charging for the software, it was way cheaper than the big storage companies because their whole business model was broken. And we took a completely different model, right? Now, the subscription was basically per year, per node, and the moment they tried, they are only going to grow, and we actually made them sticky by setting them free. We said, any day you don't like us, the product in every way was very capable of just uninstalling, and you still have your data. Any day you can walk away from it. That was a trick to actually make them stay, because that's how they trusted that that they can try it out. There is no chicken and egg problem. And similarly, all these guys, most of them, basically when they came to us, they were typically going into production environment, and the subscription was in some ways storage insurance. Like, there are still some guys who are pretty cheap, like they never want to pay you, right? We said, happily, please use it, and we were even like helping them. We said, come to our community, there are a lot of guys like you, we will all help each other. And our point was, if you force him, he's going to go away and find something else. But if he is still not paying you and using you, there are a lot of intangible values there. One day he's going to put it in production and he's going to make money. Like even when Pandora, right? First 3 years when they were fighting a legal battle, copyright issues. But when that was all cleared and they were preparing for IPO, that's when they came to us. We were very clear that we were helping from the community point of view. And even when the startup went out of business, we were helping them. They didn't make any money, it's fine. These guys go to another company, they found a job there, and now they're coming back to us. And that's how we were growing. And it's still a relatively old map, and even this map is voluntary registration. We never even tracked you should understand, marketing and distributing software, training is actually a lot of expense. Sales and marketing is where bulk of your VC investment is going to disappear. And here we came up with a low-cost model that customers were finding us. And we were turning them, like, it was an easy sell, because by the time they come to us, they are already convinced, they are sold themselves, and they are going to put it in a production environment. It was growing very nicely. And actually we were very fortunate to find Nexus. I'm not advertising for them. That was more than the money they gave us. The fact that we went with them as people, they were incredibly valuable to us. One thing I always remember, Naren, when he first found us and just 15 minutes he made up his mind. He told, great ideas are always controversial, and we see a great opportunity here. Well, every other VCs, they are sometimes money managers, or they will basically tell, okay, I don't see, like, it's too complicated, it's extremely hard business, I don't believe you guys can make it. I'm going to bring these experts from EMC, Veritas, and all these companies, and none of these guys are going to accept that what we did is right, and it will never happen. We were kind of wasting time, right? But when we found the right VC, it was perfect for us, and they felt that they were not investing in us. They felt like they're partners of the company. Like my wife actually jokes around, like Jishnu from Nexus, he is my first wife actually. I could call them anytime, and also I never felt like in board meeting you have to present a rosy picture, right? I actually never felt that. I actually went to them when I had problems, and I always came back from them with a solution. And because most of them are entrepreneurs that build great companies, they know there are ups and downs. That's why, like, I cannot do angel investment myself, because I know the pain and everyday ups and downs. It's very, very stressful. But they have seen this repeatedly multiple times, right? And they are guiding us during the worst times. Every company, there are worst and best times, and it's inevitable. Like, you get to hear only the success side of the story, right? But there are always struggles. Every day there are challenges, and how you overcome that, right? How they support you is very, very important, and we were very fortunate. We did like Series A and Series B. So luckily, Series B, same investors of Series A gave the best valuation too. We can tell that, like, we were clearly building so much value, and just a few months before we got acquired by Red Hat, the actual value was close to 800 crores, and Red Hat was the value basically, like, what Red Hat told us was, you built the company in India and outsourced management to the US. And they were very happy the way the company was built, and they could not actually build a strong engineering R&D in India, but here we built a world-class product, and that's what Nexus is proud about. For the first time, we built a high-tech, like a distributed storage operating system product from India, because a lot of other VCs and other companies told that's not possible. It's not. You can probably do like cheap stuff, like QA stuff, low-cost labor, but you cannot build such product entirely in India. But our R&D was 100% in India, and we were able to do it, and that's like a big achievement, like all of us share. Thank you.
Take questions?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take questions.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
This is Ablesh. I wish I had your energy. I've been long since I met a guy as passionate as you, and being techies ourselves. It's amazing. Hats off.
Thank you.
Only one question.
Sure.
How did you manage to sell it to Nexus? I actually want you to answer this with Sandeep. I saw him. Can I see Sandeep Ram? Is he here? Still here?
Right here.
How did you manage to sell it to him? Maybe the both of you can give us an answer.
Actually, like, what we always believe, right? Selling is both ways. It's not just to VCs. Even when you hire, you have to sell to the guy, and he has to sell to you. It's every day, whatever you do, you don't realize you are actually selling. And I think it's just my personal view, opinion about Nexus. Actually, Nexus has a very good knack of finding that, even at an early stage, that this is going to succeed. Actually, the reason, it's my view. Actually, somebody should tell the true story. They actually see the most important thing they value is team, people, and they look for passion, they look for the capabilities, because a lot of, even if they are naive, they don't know certain things, they are there to help, because they have seen, there are always problems, right? You cannot expect these entrepreneurs to know everything. Like, even like for example, like just doing market analysis. The reason why you have to do this is you have to understand how big the market is. You have to know when you receive money from them, you need to know how you are going to manage it, right? But the truth is nobody can tell beyond 6 months how it's going to look accurately. I think they really, because they are all entrepreneurs, that makes them very unique. Why they chose us, I think it's better for Sandeep to answer that question.
I think you answered the question at the start, right? When you said that you've heard a very passionate person speaking here, and that passion, has been there from day one, and that's what we back. So I think what is it we look for, right? We look for a passionate entrepreneur that's trying to solve a very large problem. The issue is that you don't want to just go and try and make the next incremental change. So what Anand described over here was that we'll go against the largest problem we can find, storage, right? And we will go against the grain. So it's a question of, yes, I know there's a large problem, I will go against the grain, but also when we ask deeper questions as to how you're thinking about it and so on, it's not superficial, right? So the issue is that you have to have more depth. And so Anand started describing this is what he wants to do, blah, 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 and everybody said, this guy knows what he's talking about, let's make sure that we back him. So I think he's been very modest. He's been written up as the top guys in storage and really sort of defining storage industry, and I think he'll do even more as part of Red Hat. But I think just very strong and deep understanding of the domain that you're playing in, and he didn't come from storage, right? But the passion to make it happen, to take your learnings from elsewhere and bring it to that space, is what sort of we back.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
Hi, this is Pratik from Your Next Leap. First of all, very great talk, and this is one of the very inspiring talks that I have heard recently. So my question is, with your startup, there are few things that must have gone wrong or could have gone wrong. Which were those things, and which you realize are going wrong or have gone wrong, and how did you rise back from those things?
Yeah, actually, that's the most important thing you should learn, right? The success part is not important. You always ask what problems they face, why certain startups fail. That's where you learn. And to us, the reason first why we succeeded is we always see failure is when you give up. And otherwise you face difficult situation every day because we had that strong reason, that strong passion. We were not willing to give up. No matter what, our option is go take a job and write proprietary software. And we were not willing to do that. That's like almost converting to a different religion. And it's not going to happen, right? So with that in mind, so we were doing that. So what kind of problems we faced? I think in every way you can imagine, like in the early days, right? Like we were angel funded. When you are angel funded, angels are the ones who take a lot of risk, right? Because before I was nobody in the industry, and here was one angel investor who was also a relative of my other co-founder, and he was willing to put money into just believing in people, right? And they were willing to guide, but angel investors also give you very little money. So we were doing, while we were developing this great product on customer's time, customer's hardware, we are also doing some web application stuff, like outsourced stuff to embedded system, folding work, to just keep us afloat. But we are wasting valuable time, and that's so painful. Like we know we are losing time. The number one enemy you have is not your computation, it's actually fighting against time. And we are losing that, and all of our guys, at daytime we have to deliver something because we have to keep our burn rate low, and in our free time we have to actually develop the product we are going to make it happen, right? That's a huge challenge. Like that, and like even building a sales team is extremely hard because sales guys are motivated by money, and if you're passionate about money, right, you have to attract them by money, you have to pay them a lot, and you have to give them that buffer. It's no easy task, and that's where a lot of your money is going. I think one advice that I can give is you should realize founders are the best sales guys. You don't have to come from the sales, you don't have to have, because customers, right, want to talk to you. They want to talk to a real person who is solving their problem. And you will find even engineers, like, just put them in front of the customer, they will learn. And customers will love talking to the guy who actually created the product. And here, engineers are learning on the fly how they have to incorporate those feedback back into the product. So, sales, I think today, it's not just like that. There are, in the last 5 years, a lot of things have changed. Today, social networking is no longer a hype. It's a great platform for you to deliver low-cost sales and marketing model. Leverage that. Like even the cloud, right? Today, like early on, we had very little money, right? So how do you build business? Today, cloud lets you build a low-cost business model. Like you can imagine in 5 to 10 years, what Google has as their strengths today, the scalable infrastructure, is going to become a baggage if they don't commoditize that themselves. If you can do one thing better than Google, and you are not wasting your money on developing the scalable infrastructure, you're just focused on your app, you can actually beat them down. You can actually do a low-cost, much more aggressive app and beat them. While Google, for them, it will become slow, it has become expensive. Many ways there are so many advantages today, but when we grew, there were challenges like building a sales team was a challenge, hiring was a challenge. We thought that we will even, like we have a lot of young, fresh guys, right, 1 or 2 years experience even, but then we thought we will blend in some experienced few guys from big companies. When we bring these guys, sometimes like what happens is they actually completely slow down everything. We realize that moment as much as you focus on hiring, you should focus on firing too. If you don't have the right guy, be quick about firing. Because imagine if there is 20% of like mediocre guys in your organization, that's more than enough. You cannot fire them, and that will have a major impact on your team, and it will pull you down. In many ways, like from people, from hiring, from keeping your burn rate low, bringing customers,